Also.
The paper starts with a puzzle. The actors at the European level try to create a European internal market for electricity for more than 3 decades now and have adopted no less than 4 electricity market packages. Nevertheless, and though considerable progress has been made in the meantime, the European electricity market is still not completed.
And our theoretical argument to tackle this puzzle is that we need to look at implementation of directives over time in the long run. So we think that the actor constellation at time point 1 influences how member states implement a directive, but in turn, the implementation of the directive changes the actor constellation, namely the power relations between the actors. That's our theoretical argument in the abstract. In the concrete, for the case of electricity market directives, our main actors are 3 actors. First, the incumbent producers that were, for the most part, vertically integrated utilities that produced electricity, transported electricity, marketed electricity. Second, the government parties that had preferences concerning the liberalization of the sector. And third, the grid companies that to some extent emerged by the unbundling of these formerly vertically integrated utilities. And our main argument is about the institutional power of these incumbent producers, because these actors have a considerable amount of institutional power. That is, their power that they have because they produce a very important public good, namely supply of electricity, where governments have trouble kind of stepping back into producing this good for themselves. So these incumbents have a very strong position by providing a very important, vital public good. And all the elements of the directives that need to be implemented, the unbundling, the market opening, the creation of a regulatory agency, all these elements directly impact on the institutional power of these incumbent producers.
Yeah, and to test our hypothesis, we undertook case studies. So we looked at 2 countries, Germany and the Netherlands, that had very similar starting conditions in the 1990s at the beginning of the liberalization process.
And we focused specifically on the market structure at the national level, where we can see high concentration in both countries, as well as many distribution system operators at the regional and municipality level. So in our case studies, we have mainly 2 results, which is Germany uses its leeway in implementation to maintain its institutional power of incumbents, and the Netherlands uses the leeway in implementation to pursue the opposite, mainly market-making policies. So in Germany, we can account this to the strong role of vertically integrated incumbents, which strengthen themselves in a reinforcing fashion by strengthening the institutional power by the means of using the discretion in directives.
Yeah, so concerning the Netherlands, the Netherlands chose to implement the electricity market packages in a way that dismantled the vertically integrated incumbents by adopting strong regulation and by creating the grid company TenneT that is state-owned and that operates the high voltage grid. And by this, the Netherlands ensures to have a grip on the electricity sector.
And one argument that we can argue against is a simple partisan preference thesis. So we think that our analysis shows how these paths are self-reinforcing and how these paths become sticky, because if you look at the composition of the governments that were in charge of implementing these directives, you see, for example, that in Germany, the FDP-CDU coalition that implemented the first Electricity Market Directive was, for the German spectrum, the more liberal coalition. Nevertheless, they chose to protect the incumbents. And this becomes especially vital and interesting if you look at the implementation of the third energy market package, that is to the right of this figure here in 2010, where we have a very liberal coalition of CDU and FDP, the German spectrum, that nevertheless chose to maintain the path to protect the incumbents, to not liberalize the market to full extent. So if you only looked at party preferences, we would have expected a very liberal implementation. But we think that even this liberal coalition implemented in a very kind of hesitant fashion because they wanted to protect the incumbents, because they stayed on the path that Germany had chosen.
What can we learn from the analysis? Well, first of all, we see that implementation of European directive matters, and that it's not enough to look at implementation at one point in time, but instead it's a very fruitful perspective to take a long-term perspective on implementation. We see in our cases that implementation generates self-enforcing paths that are hard to change, because with the implementation of each directive, this path is reinforced by the forcing of the domestic actor constellation. And what can we learn for the policy domain in this case? Well, to some extent, we can expect that the harmonization of the energy market is a never-ending project, because actors are trying to come to a conclusion here for such a long time, and the path is still very vital.